Welcome to the 50th episode of the Riyada podcast, a podcast on entrepreneurship in Jordan and the Middle East and North Africa region that we started a year ago at the Wilson Center with support from the U.S. Embassy in Amman. I'm really delighted to be recording this 50th episode from the U.S. Embassy in Amman, and I'm delighted to welcome our two guests today, Ambassador Jim Jeffrey, who is the chair of the Middle East program at the Wilson Center, and Mr. Rohit Nepal, who is the Deputy Chief of Mission at the U.S. Embassy in Amman. So thank you both for joining us today, I look forward to our conversation. So Rohit, I'm going to start with you. Thank you for your support for this podcast. Initially, the purpose was to really highlight the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Jordan and the MENA region, because it plays a very important role in Jordan's and the region's economic development. So what are you focused on here at the embassy when it comes to Jordan's economy, given the challenges that it's facing?
Well, let me start by thanking you, Ambassador Jeffrey, and the Wilson Center, because frankly, entrepreneurship and spurring economic growth are really one of our embassy's highest priorities. Jordan has a really serious unemployment problem. These days, there are about 150,000 new job entrants every year into the economy, and only 40,000 new jobs approximately created each year. So you've got a huge gap. Addressing this unemployment is really going to require Jordan's government to grow, Jordan's economy to grow much faster than it has typically. And so our embassy has really spent a tremendous amount of time and effort, both the State Department, USAID, in particular, in supporting the King's economic modernization vision, which is really looking at new sources of growth. Ultimately, from a U.S. Embassy perspective, though, we really recognize that this job creation really needs to come from the private sector. So seeing a podcast like this and discussions about improving the environment for entrepreneurship are really important from our side of the table.
And Ambassador Jeffrey, we spent the whole day with so many different entrepreneurs at Flat Six Labs, one of the funds here that helps a lot of the startups in Jordan and the rest of the region. Why is advancing Jordan's economic development important for the United States?
Well, it's important, first of all, and I'm speaking as an observer of U.S. foreign policy, not as a participant anymore in it, but traditionally we have very much seen economic activity, the private sector, investment in technology as partners, as companions to what is often a core security relationship. And as Rohit knows, this embassy is famous for its very extensive security relationship with our security partner, Jordan. But nonetheless, what we've seen going back in Germany and Japan, the number 3 and 4 economies in the world today, are Taiwan, the chip capital of the world bar none. You can not only combine a security relationship with a economic, private sector, entrepreneurial, technical relationship, but to some degree, they're multipliers, they reinforce each other. And thus, I'd like to hear how Rohit sees the link between the two, because I'm just being very general there.
Ambassador, we at this embassy fully concur with that vision. From an Embassy Amman perspective, it's quite striking to me. I served here from 2014 to 2017 previously, and then returned in October or September of 2022. The difference in our orientation as a mission is quite dramatic. We were heavily securitized or focused primarily on supporting Jordan and addressing the threat that was posed by ISIS. Of course, that's something that we continue to support and work with Jordan on today. But our number one priority as a mission is supporting Jordan's economic growth, because we see economic security as vital to Jordan's national security and Jordan's stability, and its ability to be the partner that we have to have the partnership that we've long enjoyed with Jordan into the future.
And economic security is tied to human security. And we know that Jordan, hosting a large number of refugees, has to grapple with a lot of challenges. So I want to delve a little bit into some of the findings that we basically picked up throughout the discussions that we've had with entrepreneurs in Jordan and the MENA region. And we've interviewed not only entrepreneurs, but also investors and other stakeholders in the ecosystem from Egypt, Lebanon, Iraq, Tunisia, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE. So we had a really rich guest list for this podcast. And many entrepreneurs we interviewed flagged the regulatory environment, particularly in Jordan, as a major obstacle when it comes to the tech sector. And Ambassador Jeffrey, you mentioned the importance of this sector, particularly in the future of work and its impact on the future of work. Rohit, you mentioned the Jordan's modernization vision, and the tech sector is certainly part of it. So why do we continue to see these regulations in place even after more than a decade of various attempts to reform and make this ecosystem more friendly?
I'd say it's a very tricky balance with the government. The most common complaint we hear from the private sector really is they generally center around instability in the regulatory and tax environments, challenges that are common in a lot of emerging markets. But in Jordan, we obviously have, as His Majesty laid out, a very aggressive economic modernization vision. So we're in a period where the government is really trying to lay the groundwork for an environment that will be hospitable and welcoming to private sector development. I think it's really important in the context of Jordan to remember also, as we see in the United States, that entrepreneurs themselves and the private sector itself has a role to play in the policy dialogues with the government to make sure that the government really understands their needs. We see this here in Jordan. The American Chamber of Commerce and its members were very active in the discussions that led to the Royal Economic Modernization Vision. So that was a positive development in that you had that dialogue between the private sector and the public sector. From the U.S. side, obviously, U.S. government employees are always trained to focus on the importance of developing a vibrant public sector, or private sector, as a way to ensure economic security and ensure the capacity of the United States to maintain our diplomatic and security presence around the world. As a diplomat, I've certainly expected, and it's made very clear by both the President and the Secretary of State, that I have a role in promoting U.S. businesses and the U.S. economy. It's interesting. I just spent my Friday evening, which was on the weekend, meeting with a group of U.S. buyers for a company here in Jordan that is actually looking to open up a manufacturing plant in the United States. And that was something that my whole team was very excited to participate in, because we're looking at the real possibility of a Jordanian company that's done business in the United States and is moving to the next stage of actually creating a facility that will create American jobs.
Yeah, so it goes both ways, and that's a really good example of that. Ambassador Jeffrey, you mentioned earlier today the workshop why it's so important for the United States to support programs such as this podcast project that enhance exchanges between not only both governments in Jordan and the United States, but between the people, and in this particular case, the private sector. What can Jordanians hope for in learning from the American entrepreneurial experience?
First of all, I think that the United States, by none, and we heard a fair amount of this from entrepreneurs here themselves, is the entrepreneurial center of the world in terms of rapidity of idea to production to sales, and also a technology-free environment. But the other thing is, I think we bring social capital values to bear. For example, coming into the embassy today, I noticed you have an exhibit of Jordanian women painters.
Perfect.
And this is to advance, I don't know whether it's Women's History Month or, but it certainly sets the tone of how we are looking at things. Specifically on women, what is their role here in Jordan in the private sector?
Ambassador, that's a great question. Unfortunately, it's right now the situation isn't great. The truth is that Jordan has a very low female workforce participation, second lowest in the world, and that shows what that means is that half of Jordan's population's potential is essentially not unlocked. So as an embassy, one of the things that we certainly focus on, particularly in our USAID programming, but across the mission, as you saw with the art exhibit too, both from the power of our demonstration, but also from the power of the work we do on a daily basis in supporting the Jordanian government and the Jordanian private sector, is to really find ways to improve that very low female workforce participation. That can range from helping the government eliminate regulatory barriers to also working with the private sector to show them best practices that we have in the United States that help improve the circumstances or the capabilities of getting women into the workforce. A fundamental challenge here, a fundamental opportunity, actually, I'd say, is the fact that Jordanian women are very highly educated and highly skilled.
Right.
So getting them into the workforce is exactly the way that we're going to get Jordan on the path that we all want to see it on.
And that's what the World Bank refers to as the MENA paradox, that basically, as you refer to, women in certain countries, including Jordan, are outperforming men in tertiary education, but that's not being translated into the labor market. So I want to turn to, again, back to Jordan and the United States. Jordan was the first country, I think, in the region to sign a free trade agreement with the United States. But talking to so many entrepreneurs, not only through the podcast, but, offline, it seems that the FTA is not as utilized as it should be. How can the FTA be better utilized to increase exports or to just, invigorate bilateral trade further?
The FTA is a really wonderful tool available to the Jordanian private sector. And we've observed the same, that we want to see more trade and better use of the opportunity that the FTA presents. As part of that, we have at the American Chamber of Commerce an FTA unit that helps companies better employ the agreement. Part of this issue is that the U.S. market is enormous. We're a very complicated economy. We're not we're enormous, and it can be very challenging for exporters, particularly smaller exporters, to just figure their way through the U.S. market. It requires a lot of money and time, and so one of the things we offer is that one of the best resources for companies that want to exporting the United States is the staff at the American Chamber of Commerce at this FTA unit that are available to assist. On the import side, because the FTA also benefits Jordanian importers and Jordanian consumers, because it allows Jordanian importers to get duty-free access to a wide range of products. You've probably seen here in Jordan, if you go to a grocery store or a shopping mall, that there's a pretty significant presence of U.S. Imports here.
Right.
That's a result of the FTA. For importers who are looking to select the United States as a source for their products, the U.S. Commercial Service is a resource that can help them connect to U.S. exporters in their field.
Yeah, and we only hope that we'll see more bilateral trade. I know the textile industry in particular has been doing very well and has increased significantly in the last few years. That's basically U.S. companies coming here to the qualified industrial zones and then exporting garments back to the United States. So one thing that we concluded a lot of our discussions with in our podcast series was ask a lot of the entrepreneurs and other stakeholders we interviewed if they had any words of wisdom or lessons learned from their own entrepreneurial journeys. So both of you are career diplomats. Ambassador Jeffrey, you spent more than 40 years in global affairs. And so what would you tell the youth of Jordan about venturing into the private sector, particularly those who are sometimes influenced by family about the public sector?
First of all, given my deep commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, I don't use terms like youth because now I also have to use terms like old, which would include me. Rather, the way I twist it is those who are commencing a career phase in their lives, regardless of their age, are facing the same thing. What you want to do, because you have no choice, is to start off with what, as Merissa was briefing in her presentation today, is the technical side of authority-driven relationships in any bureaucratic organization. That's simply the reality in the foreign service, the military, and business, and everything else. And where much of work is transactional and technical. But it is very important, the sooner the better, for people to start looking at opportunities to develop informal as well as formal authority based upon trust, confidence, interpersonal relations. The reason that is so is that at a certain point in a career, and we certainly see this at the upper levels of the Foreign Service, you're focused not on a transactional, technical, authority-driven, worked and interpersonal exchange model, but rather one of leadership. Where what matters is the ability to deal with changes to the status quo. Bottom line, mission development, persuading, taking risk, working out new creative solutions. And this is a very hard transition. The sooner people can understand, first of all, the difference, and secondly, find opportunities, and mentoring and being mentored are at the top of the barrel when it comes to that, the quicker they will be in the running to move to that critical level of leadership in any institution.
Thank you for that. Rohit, what would you tell?
Well, I have spent the vast majority of my professional career in the government, although I did spend a little bit of time in the private sector as an attorney. But I'm actually going to reflect based on the experience of my mother, who is an entrepreneur, who I've learned a tremendous amount from. The first thing is the willingness to take risk and to not be afraid to fail. In my mother's case, she started with the dream of opening up a business that would sell computers. This was a long time ago, and the home computer was a big deal.
Yeah,
it seems a long time ago now, but and frankly, that business really didn't develop for her. But she saw an opportunity in selling office supplies. Wasn't her original passion. And she developed that into a multi-million-dollar company in the United States. And then in 2008, when the financial crisis happened, that business dried up for a variety of reasons. And she was able to pivot again, so a second time, to another type of product. And that taught me that you really need to be willing to fail, or at least fall down. And when you fall forward. Find a way to make that an opportunity, not simply just a setback. And then, just generally speaking, I think, particularly having seen the opportunities that exist here in Jordan, specific to Jordan, I really encourage young people to be prepared, because there are opportunities everywhere in this country. And it's really a matter of identifying that thing that you believe, or that segment of the market that you believe that you can service, and then be ready when the moment avails itself to actually take action and try to start your business.
He meant, of course, people of any age starting a new business. But as sure and
You're never too old to start a new career. Absolutely. Well, I thank you so much to both of you. Very important lessons learned and messages to people of all ages in Jordan. And I guess this kind of reminds me with what I started today's workshop with, which is basically when you're a kid and you learn how to ride a bike. You don't, your parents don't give you a book on bicycology. You have to get on the bike and you have to fall multiple times until you get it. And so that very much sums up the entrepreneurial journey for so many people in Jordan and the MENA region, and pretty much describes, I think, my personal engagement with this project. It was an entrepreneurial journey of its own. My team and I, Brooke and Alex, had to do so many different things to continuously try and, made mistakes along the way, but learned. And it was an absolute pleasure to work with members of the U.S. Embassy from the Public Affairs Office. So thank you so much for your support again. And we promise you that the Riyada podcast will continue to focus on economic development in the region. So thank you for giving the Wilson Center the opportunity to launch. So thank you, Ambassador Jeffrey, Mr. Rohit Nepal, for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the collaboration.
This podcast is funded by a grant from the United States Department of State. The opinions, findings, and conclusions of this podcast are those of our guests and do not necessarily reflect those of the United States Department of State.